I played every Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi game. Here's my thoughts. Part 2. In my previous Budokai Tenkaichi video, I played the first 3 Tenkaichi games. In this video, I'll be playing the rest of the series. As always, thank you all so much for the support. It means a lot to me, and if you like these kinds of videos, please consider subscribing because there's a lot more to come. I'm doing this pretty much full time now, so I've got tons of stuff cooking up for you guys. Before we get into the games, I really want to give a thanks to today's sponsor, Atlas VPN. Hey, check it out. Have you ever tried to watch a movie on your favorite streaming service, only to find out that it is available, just not in your country? What if I told you there was a way to unlock all of this gated content and protect your online privacy on all your devices at the same time? Atlas VPN is a VPN that does both of these things and more. And they're running a massive discount. 3 years for only $1.39 a month, which is a super great price. Plus, they've got a 30-day money-back guarantee. Make sure you check out my link in the video description below before this deal is over. If you're wondering what kind of things Atlas VPN can do for you, let me show you. I personally used Atlas VPN just today to watch the Nolan Batman films, which are on Netflix but not in America. All I had to do was open Atlas VPN, select the country I wanted, and that's it. In fact, as far as Netflix knew, I was in the country that had the movie. Plus, the stream wasn't delayed or slow or anything. I actually forgot I was using the VPN almost immediately because of how smooth it was. Atlas VPN also includes a cool feature called the data breach monitor. Just input your email address in the breach scanner and it'll do a search for you to tell you if your data has been compromised on tons of websites. As you can see, I probably need to take care of some of these, and I wouldn't have known my data was compromised if it wasn't for Atlas VPN. With Atlas VPN, you can protect unlimited devices and you can do it all for the crazy low price of $1.39 a month. It's the best VPN deal on the market, and there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. Trust me, you don't want to miss out on this one. Get this deal before it's gone by checking my link in the description. Alright, let's get right back into the games. Dragon Ball Raging Blast was released for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in 2009. While not technically using the Tenkaichi name, this is kind of a burst limit situation, and the game is for all intents and purposes a Tenkaichi game. The gameplay in Raging Blast is fairly similar to the Tenkaichi games too, albeit with some clear differences. Energy moves are now all mapped to the right stick, and each direction allows for a different move. Clicking in the stick when your key is fully charged allows you to use your ultimate. Oh, and the lock-on system seems to be completely gone too. You have the ability to dash toward an enemy at normal speed by holding X or A on Xbox, but if you're not moving and press it, you can do a much faster dash. The dash works pretty much the same as previous games, just with a different control combination. If you and the enemy both do this dash at the same time, you have a dash struggle, where you have to rotate the control stick faster to win the struggle. Also, whenever you're knocked away by a powerful attack, you have to do the same control stick spinning move to recover. Oh, and you can transform in battle just by using a simple button combination, and you get to choose which form you transform into. Unlike previous games, this means that you can go straight from base form to something like Super Saiyan 3 as Goku. There's also this new mechanic where you can knock opponents into the scenery like a rock wall, and they get stuck for a short amount of time where you can just kind of wail on them. A small issue I have with this game though is how sometimes after you use an ability, there's kind of an end lag. I assume this is so you can't just spam abilities and the enemy has time to retaliate, but it kind of just makes your character feel like they're lagging. I don't really know how else to put it. The previous 3 games did not feel like this, so it's definitely a new thing. But really, it's not that big of a deal. The biggest issue I have with this game is the camera. This game is a very movement-oriented game, and you're flying all around the maps. However, sometimes the camera just doesn't know what to do. It can start spinning rapidly as you attempt to keep a lock on the enemy, or it can just get stuck super close to the action and make it really hard to tell what's going on. I don't think any of the previous Tenkaichi games had this issue, at least not nearly as bad as this game does. Otherwise, the game feels fine to play. Oh, and of course, this game gets extra points from me for having character-specific dialogue. So the graphics in this game are really good, though I feel as though the visual style has kind of a clashing stylistic issue. For example, the character models are cel-shaded and look great as you'd expect, but the stages feel like they're a different style entirely. They're super detailed, but they're also kind of flat shaded. The characters don't feel like they're actually a part of this world. Some might disagree, but I feel like a slightly more cartoony landscape would make this game look a little better. A neat touch that returns from previous games is the degradation of characters' costumes as the fights go on. If you can't tell, I really love when games do that. The modes in Raging Blast are Dragon Battle Collection, Dojo, Ultimate Customize, World Tournament, Online Battle, Versus, Super Battle Trial, and Museum. The story mode in this game, Dragon Battle Collection, is broken up by sagas that you can access right away. It includes everything up to the Buu Saga plus a Bardock Saga and a Broly Saga. There's also an additional section called What If Stories. I've gotta say, I really like the menus in this mode. Every menu option has a little diorama that's a moment frozen in time from the saga. When you select a saga, you're sent into a sub-menu where you can view a prologue and all of the available fights. The prologue is just some text that gives you a little bit of backstory and context. When you select a battle you want to play, you choose the difficulty, and then there's an introductory cutscene followed by the battle itself. The cutscenes here aren't really all that impressive, but they're decent enough. They're no burst limit though. To its credit, it does have full voice acting, so I'm pretty happy with it. Also, there's a shockingly high number of missions where you're using the villain instead of just Goku. I kinda like that variety. Beating story missions unlocks some secret missions, along with some extra stuff, like moves to equip to your characters. Beating the missions on hard difficulty has some extra clear conditions that give you stars. You can spend stars in the star shop to unlock stuff like costumes and the locked levels. I also really like the what if scenarios. Not only are they a fun premise, the dialogue between the characters is super entertaining, and I think it's great that the story doesn't take itself too seriously. Versus mode is a versus mode. There's player versus CPU, player versus player, and CPU versus CPU. Though the CPU versus CPU mode in this one is called Watch Mode. Super Battle Trial is not just one mode, but a few. There's Arcade Mode, Survival Mode, Time Attack, Score Attack, KO Attack, and a few unlockable ones including Destruction Attack, where the goal is to defeat enemies and destroy as many buildings as possible for extra points. The other modes are straightforward and exactly what they sound like. Museum mode is pretty good in this game, specifically the character profiles. You can look at the profile for every character you have, and they all have their own first-person accounts along with a nice voice line. I love stuff like this, for real. Ultimate Customize allows you to customize your characters. The first thing you can change is the character's deck. This is kind of a grid that every character has where you can slot in items you've acquired over the course of the game. Every item has various stat boosts and takes up a certain number of slots in the grid. You can buy more items to put into the slots using points you've earned over time, along with outright expansions to your deck's size. You can also customize the moves for each character here too. Each move is mapped to a control stick direction, obviously, and you can change which move is in which direction. You can also change what moves are equipped entirely. World Tournament mode includes a classic World Tournament and also a Cell Games variant. For starters, you can change the options to change the number of participants, the difficulty, and the entry requirements, which I think is super interesting. If you want, you can make the whole tournament Saiyans only. The presentation here is kinda sorta similar to previous games, but the characters are now represented by actual models on the brackets. Also, the tournament still has the announcer, but the actual presentation is completely different. Honestly, I love the way the announcer works in this game. The announcer talks the entire time during the fight and actually says different things depending on how the fight's going. Beating the World Tournament unlocks items and extra stuff like transformations for your characters. The Cell Games are a variation of the standard World Tournament. The presentation is similar on the brackets, but the fights are a bit more challenging since your HP doesn't fully heal after every fight. This one has two announcers too, including Herculin, his only appearance in this game. The little loading screen minigame in this one actually has points attached to it. You control a little flying Nimbus as you attempt to collect as many capsules as possible, almost like a simplified version of Snake. It's actually kind of fun, and the points are the same ones that can be used to buy character upgrades. Raging Blast is a decent game overall. I'd have a hard time putting it anywhere near the top of the series, but it's definitely got some high points that I think make it worth playing if you're a big Dragon Ball fan. Dragon Ball Raging Blast 2, released for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in 2010. Something super interesting about Raging Blast 2 is its inclusion of an entire 30-minute OVA called Plan to Eradicate the Super Saiyans. Watching it actually unlocks the villain from the OVA, Hachiak. Visually, this game seems to have a slightly different style of lighting and shading for the characters. They seem to fit in a bit more with the environments this time due to the better lighting effects, but at the same time, I'm sure some people, myself included, probably prefer the more anime-styled lighting from the last game. The best way I can explain it is that there's less contrast in the shading and in the lighting than there was in the first game. The first game looked generally more cartoony. Honestly, the changes are kind of subtle without having a direct comparison, and if I wasn't playing these games back to back, I might not have noticed a difference. That being said, my complaint from the first game was that the environmental details clashed with the look of the characters, and I think the better solution was to make the environments more cartoony, rather than making the characters less cartoony. Also, the weird camera issues I was running into in the first game are significantly better this time around, which is awesome. Gameplay-wise, there were a couple of small changes and additions, but nothing I'd consider too crazy. I'd say the biggest one is a new mode you can get into called Raging Soul when you fully charge your ki, and it makes it to where you're way stronger but you can't use any special abilities. In Raging Soul, you actually gain access to new combos though that you can't normally do, so it kinda balances out. They've also added a thing where you can intercept enemies attempting to tag out characters, but that just gives you the opportunity to do a series of kinda quick time actions to deal a bit of damage to the person who tags in. Oh, and the weird end lag thing from the last game feels way better in this one. The modes in Raging Blast 2 are broken down a little bit differently than the previous games. They're single play, battle, online battle, world tournament, ultimate customize, and museum. In single play, there's Galaxy Mode, Battle Zone, Tutorial, and Training. Galaxy Mode is the replacement for the story mode in this game, except it's not even close to a story mode. In it, you choose a character and then you fight a series of fights down branching paths with different modifiers. Sometimes, for example, you'll have to complete the fight while your HP is automatically decreasing over time, or you'll have to complete the fight within a certain time limit. It is a nice mode with a lot of fights, but it's also only these fights. There's no story or cutscenes at all. Something I really do like about this mode though, is that while the progression is linear, usually the paths will start to branch as you clear fights. This can actually make some characters' paths look deceptively short until you've unlocked more of the branches. Beating fights usually unlocks extra characters and transformations, along with other stuff like museum artwork and music depending on how well you did. Also, sometimes when you beat certain fights, it unlocks branches on other characters' paths, which is a neat touch, and it gives you a reason to revisit other characters' paths even if you've already completed them. Also, if you complete a character's path, you unlock a Dragon Ball. Unlocking all 7 Dragon Balls allows you to summon Shenron to make a wish. A neat little thing I like when you summon Shenron is that if you wait too long, he actually has dialogue for being impatient. Something I noticed in this game is that sometimes the characters will have dialogue that happens during the fights, but I don't know what triggers it, and it didn't really happen very often at all. It was still nice to see whenever it did happen though. Otherwise though, this mode is incredibly bare bones in the story department. If you're looking for story, Raging Blast 2 isn't very strong there. I will say though that I did play this mode way longer than I expected, mainly because I do enjoy unlocking characters and some of the challenges and branching paths were pretty fun. The next single player mode is Battle Zone. Battle Zone is kind of like Raging Blast 2's version of Ultimate Battle Z from Tenkaichi 2. You pick a character and then you pick which series of fights you want to do. In this version though, you have to clear the first set of fights before you can choose the next. During the fights, there are some extra requirements you can complete to collect stamps. The stamps don't really seem to do anything, but it's nice to have an extra challenge and something to work toward. The fights also have hidden routes that you can take for completing the fights in certain ways, like using a special attack or landing a combo with a minimum number of hits. Beating the battle zones with certain characters unlocks an enhanced version of that character. These versions of the characters are stronger, but they can't be customized at all. In fact, normal Hachiak has a power level of 20 in the DP battle mode, whereas his enhanced version has a power level of 27, but again, you can't customize him. Something I'll also note about Battle Zone, there were a couple of times where I saw some dialogue happen in the middle of the battle, but of course, every time it happened, I wasn't recording. It did happen super randomly though, like Yamcha telling one of the Cybermen that they shouldn't underestimate him. I assume these pieces of dialogue are just random and happen between characters who have some kind of relationship with who they're fighting, but it's so inconsistent and random that I have really no way of confirming this. Back to the main menu in battle mode. There's single battles, team battles, and power battles. Single battles are standard one-on-one battles. Team battles are battles up to 5 characters that swap out. And power battles work similarly to the DP battles from Tenkaichi 3, where every character is assigned a power level. World Tournament is back this time with all the extra announcer stuff from the last game. The presentation here is totally different though. Instead of the normal brackets, it's now like a big ring thing. But it's still a good mode and it's still the same foundationally. Something that I really like about the World Tournament in this game though is the ability to mess with the rules. You could do that in the previous game too, but there's a few extra options now. There's a ring out toggle, an option that lets you carry over your HP from the previous match, kind of like the Cell games, and an option that allows you to fight the previous World Tournament champion. The Cell games are the second World Tournament mode, and there are even more options here. Outside of the extra options and locale change, the mode is functionally the same as the normal World Tournament, aside from your health not being regained between fights. Ultimate Customize is changed to be closer kinda to the original Tenkaichi games in my opinion. You can customize the super moves of your characters and equip items to them that boost their stats. Every item you equip has a point value and every character has a point limit. Using the characters in Galaxy mode actually can increase their point limit though, so you can equip more items. The museum mode in this game has a few options. There's the BGM collection, which is the music player, the battle replay mode, which allows you to view saved replays, view picture mode, which, allows you to view your collected pictures, features, view movie mode, which includes the 30-minute OVA, and the character encyclopedia. The character encyclopedia includes a summary of the character and their background, along with some voice clips you can listen to. The loading screen minigame in this one is kind of a simple press the buttons and order as fast as you can thing. Honestly, to me, this one's kind of a step down because all of them are simple, but this one doesn't even have any kind of Dragon Ball theming to it. Overall, Raging Blast 2 doesn't really do a whole lot more than Raging Blast 1. I think if anything, Raging Blast 1 was a pretty solid foundation to add even more story elements and modes. Raging Blast 2 could have been the culmination of all of those possible additions, just like Tenkaichi 3 was. Instead, it's pretty forgettable, at least to me. It's not a bad game at all, don't get me wrong. It feels really good to play, way better than the first Raging Blast in my opinion. Plus, they fixed some issues like the camera. It just had a lot more potential to do a lot more stuff. In all honesty, if anything, I think the additional content and fixes in Raging Blast 2 could have just been a patch or DLC for the first game. Dragon Ball Z Tenkaichi Tag Team released for the PlayStation Portable in 2010. Gameplay-wise, this one somehow manages to retain basically all of the feel and gameplay of the first 3 Tenkaichi games. In fact, it feels really distilled and solid here, and this is for the PSP. The biggest change is that there can now be multiple characters on the battlefield. Otherwise, it works mostly the same. You can switch between the targets and choose who you want to engage, and also choose to ignore a target and have you and your ally focused on just one opponent. It's a pretty nice shake-up to the formula. Struggles are back in this game, and one of them is a rush struggle where you have to mash O faster to win. The other is a beam struggle, which also requires you mash O, but it has a different aesthetic. Like a lot of the previous games, there's a fusion mechanic in this game, but with a twist. You can only use it if your partner is the other fusion character. So, for example, if you want Goku to be able to fuse into Vegito, you have to have Vegeta as your partner. Same with Goten and Trunks if you want Gotenks. I really like this little extra strategic element they threw into the game, and I think it works really well for the kind of game that this is. Visually, this game looks incredibly nice for a PSP game. It takes a lot of cues from the first 3 Tenkaichi games, but still has its own distinct style. The characters are textured in such a way that they have bold, contrasting lines, and it's a very refined style. The maps are far simpler than something you'd find in previous games or on a console in general, but this is the PSP we're talking about. This game looks great for what it is. The modes in Tenkaichi Tag Team are Dragon Walker, Battle Selection, Free Battle, Multiplayer, Customize, and Training. Dragon Walker is the story mode in this game, and it's surprisingly fleshed out. It covers all the way through the Buu saga, but unfortunately has no movie content or anything from GT. That being said, it still has a pretty impressively sized cast for a PSP game. In Dragon Walker, you navigate the world on a world map, sort of like the one from Tenkaichi 2, except this time it's an overhead view and the characters are very much chibified. You navigate the map as any character you want in your party, and you can switch between them freely. When navigating the map, you go to landmarks to progress the story. Sometimes enemies will show up on the map and you're able to either engage them one at a time, or you can use this aura spreading ability to engage multiple for a better bonus. You can also use other abilities to stun and daze your enemies on the map. Once you encounter an enemy, you're put into a fight, usually against 2 enemies. Sometimes though, there were one-on-one fights, which is nice. The game works just as well with one-on-one fights as it does with 2-on-2. Sometimes the fights are even 1-on-2. Let me just say also, this game has a ton of voice acting for a PSP game. Like, way more than I ever expected. Not every bit of dialogue is voiced, but it feels like a majority is. Also, there's dialogue during fights, which is something I love to see, and it works really well in this game. Battle Selection has 2 modes in it, Battle 100 and Survival. Battle 100 is a unique mode where you choose from a set of predetermined battles on a grid. Clearing lines on the grid gives you extra points, sorta like bingo. Survival mode is similar to previous games. You fight enemies endlessly, and when you defeat them, you get an HP recharge and more enemies show up, 2 at a time. Free Battle is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. You're able to choose your character, your CPU companion, and your 2 opponents. You can also adjust their individual difficulties. Another thing you can do is adjust sensu beans for each team. Every sensu bean is 1 revive for a down character, meaning if you have 1 sensu bean, whoever dies first uses it and you have no more after that. By the way, the sensu bean mechanic was also in the story mode. Customize is the mode where you equip items to your characters to increase their strength. The items in this game are called D items, but work pretty much the same as Z items from previous games. Every character has a point limit and every item has a point value, so you can only equip items up to that value for each character. There's also a shop where you can buy D items using the currency called D points. The loading screen in this game has you moving left and right to catch fruit in a basket, and the fruit actually gives you D points. Overall, Tenkaichi Tag Team is an incredibly solid game, and that's before taking into account that it was only on the PSP. I really like this game, and there's a pretty good amount of stuff to do in it. If you're a Dragon Ball fan and you haven't given this game a shot, I highly recommend it. Dragon Ball Z Ultimate Tenkaichi released in 2011 for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. Okay. This game is different. Let me start by saying the visuals in this game are fantastic. They took the style that they went for in Tenkaichi Tag Team and blew it up and made it HD. That's the best way I can explain it. It just looks so good. The shading is less cartoony but still feels decidedly anime and super cool. There's also some really cool stage deformation stuff where using beam attacks and explosive attacks can leave craters in the stage that remain for the entire battle. The gameplay is... well, this is where this game has me feeling a certain kind of way. Well, actually, I don't really know how to feel about it. It feels kind of like a middle ground between Budokai and Tenkaichi, but at the same time, it feels like this game is playing itself most of the time. Let me explain. You're able to move around freely and guard and do most of the normal 3D stuff. However, anytime you engage with the enemy, the entire battle turns into a QuickTime event. Every attack becomes a minigame where you're basically just flipping a coin. The game takes control from you, and it's a 50-50 shot if you're going to take damage or receive damage, even if you initiated the attack. You have the option to use special moves, but even those are turned into QuickTime events. What this means is that the fights aren't really fights anymore. The control you have over your characters is minimal. There are some attacks you can do without triggering an event, but if you try to even attempt a combo, you're gonna lose control of your character again. The attacks you can use depend on your range. There's melee range and blast range. Melee range is when you're close to enemies, and for the most part, you can't use special or beam attacks when you're close to an enemy. To use them, you have to back up into blast range. From there, you can use the control stick kind of like in the Raging Blast games. Sometimes there's also defense interactions where if you have enough ki, you can perform certain dodge moves to dodge enemy attacks. But I don't think there was a single time I ever had enough, because the game doesn't seem to actually use ki for attacks. Instead, you use a separate gauge to the right called the Spirit Gauge. This increases just from fighting and doing chase attacks. You can charge your ki, but it's pretty much pointless. Okay, let me rephrase. It's not pointless, but you may as well not do it. I never had any issues with any fights, and I barely ever charged my ki. Health isn't represented by a bar in this game. Instead, it's represented by a transparent green Dragon Ball that slowly turns red and breaks as you take damage. You do have a hard number for your HP on the left, but I kind of like the Dragon Ball aesthetic. One thing to this game's credit, though, is that the fights are pretty entertaining to watch, at least at first. For the most part, though, they do become very quickly repetitive and boring, and the only reason I continued chugging along was for the story mode, and so I could give this game a fair shake for you guys. The modes in Ultimate Tenkaichi are Story Mode, Hero Mode, Battle Mode, World Tournament Mode, Customize, Online Battle, Capsule House, and Training Mode. Story Mode in this one is insane. I just need to get out of the way that some of the cutscenes in this one are fully animated. Like, you're sometimes straight up just watching a TV show in between the fights in this game. Others are 3D in-engine, but still a big step above most of the other Tenkaichi games. Also, when you're in fights, it does that thing where there's entire cutscenes within the fight, and I really enjoy that kind of thing. There's a world map in this one like we've seen in previous games, and you fly around to different landmarks that show up on your Dragon Radar. Once you've arrived to a landmark, you either find an item like a Dragon Ball, or you're able to jump right into a cutscene or fight. Interestingly, during the free roam, you're able to change the game's difficulty on the fly, or go back and replay fights you've already done. You can also access the World Tournament on the fly using the character you're controlling, but I'll talk about the World Tournament a little bit later. Oh, and beating fights in the story mode unlocks new abilities for your characters. Hero mode is the second single-player story mode, and you can create your own custom character. There are 3 types of characters: standard, light, and heavy. Each one of them has their own stat specializations. I chose standard type for my character. After you choose your class, you can customize your character's look. There's not a whole lot of options to choose from as far as hairstyles and clothes go, but you can unlock more of them from playing the mode. The presentation here is largely the same as the normal story mode, but you're controlling your custom character in an alternate universe. Something I didn't expect was the custom character having actual dialogue. I think it's a really nice touch, and they didn't even have to do this. They could have gone the silent protagonist route, so I'm glad they did. Winning fights in this mode increases a bunch of stats over time, which also strengthens your custom character. Progressing in this mode also unlocks masters who can train you and allow you to learn their abilities. If you want to learn abilities, you have to select a master first, and you can only have one at a time. Each master has training battles where you fight them to get stat increases. Some of them, though, also have trade-offs for stat increases, like stat decreases in certain areas. Hero mode has full cutscenes, and while they're not animated for obvious reasons, they're still really good, and the mode is an overall good and fun mode that isn't just retreading the normal Dragon Ball story. It's almost kind of like a proto-Xenoverse. And for the record, you can use this custom character in other modes too. Battle mode is about the same as previous games, with a couple couple of minor differences. There's two battle types, single battle, which is self-explanatory, and team battle. In team battle, you can set up a team with up to 5 characters. As you defeat opponents, the next character in line replaces the enemy or you if you're defeated until there's none left. Something I really enjoy about this mode is the ability to choose which songs play. There's pretty much a whole playlist for each saga that you can choose from, and it's a really neat touch. Plus, you can actually mess with the playlists and create your own in the customization mode, which I'll get to. World Tournament mode includes a standard World Tournament and the Cell Games variant, as usual. World Tournament works about the same as previous games. You pick a character and climb the tournament ladder while the announcer commentates the whole thing. Also, a neat touch that extends to this mode too is the little random tidbits of dialogue from characters that aren't even involved in the fight, almost as if they're in the crowd spectating you. Something that the World Tournament caused me to notice though was the inconsistency of character locations in this game. I noticed that triggering some attacks would place me square in the center of the tournament stage, regardless of where I was on the level beforehand. Because of this, I couldn't actually find out if this game has ringouts in the arena, but based on this and some googling, I'm gonna go out on a limb and assume it doesn't. Customize mode has a few things in it. First, you can customize your character skill sets, including stat bonuses. It also includes the BGM medleys I mentioned earlier that you can use in the versus mode stages. It's a cool feature, and I don't know if I've seen many games do something like this. Honestly, this should be something that you can do in any fighting game, hands down. I love this. Capsule House is this game's museum mode, and it has a really cool aesthetic. The options are Character Encyclopedia, Dragon Balls, Replays, and Movie Viewer. Character Encyclopedia is similar to previous games' museum modes. You're able to look at the character bios and listen to some of their voice lines. Dragon Balls just lets you look at your collected Dragon Balls. Replays is where you can watch battle replays, and the Movie Viewer allows you to rewatch the animated cutscenes from the story mode. This game's loading screen has you pointing a little crosshair and shooting the capsules, shooting gallery style. I think Ultimate Tenkaichi is the perfect example of style over substance. It's something I feel like was made for a specific kind of player, but I'm not sure if that kind of player exists. This game could have been a top tier Tenkaichi game if they had made it play like Tenkaichi, because the story content and presentation in this is better than any other game in my opinion. I'm sure there are people out there who actually really like this game and the way it plays, but I just didn't like the way it plays nearly as much as any of the other games I played for this video. I just don't like how hands-off it is. Dragon Ball Z Zenkai Battle is a little weird. I didn't actually get to play this one because it's an arcade exclusive game that's only available in Japan. I know that's gonna upset some people. I originally wasn't gonna include it at all, but I figured I'd at least mention it. This is my guarantee that if I'm ever able to actually go to Japan and find this, I will record myself playing it for you guys. Gameplay wise, this looks a lot like Tenkaichi Tag Team, but in a more modern engine with better visuals. It looks like it has an online mode and you're able to save your individual progress, including scores and character unlocks. Speaking of character unlocks, it looks like this game covers all the way through Dragon Ball Super content, since there's a Super Saiyan Blue form for Goku, and the addition of Beerus and Golden Frieza. There's also characters like Broly and Janemba. I really do wish we got this one in the West because it looks like a lot of fun, especially since it does the Tenkaichi Tag Team thing. Like I said, maybe someday I can go to Japan and hunt down one of these machines. And that's it. That's every Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi game. Well, almost. I was going to mention Dragon Ball Z for Connect here, but it didn't really fit in a way that I thought I could make work in this video. And it's also not really a Tenkaichi game, at least not in my opinion. That being said, I do plan on including it in a future video, so do keep a lookout for that. Overall, these games are massively nostalgic for me, and probably a lot of other people too, so getting to play them all again was a huge treat. These games have a lot more to them than the standard Budokai games too. I went out of my way to cover as much as possible, but I'm sure there's some small things that I missed. I think I covered most of the big stuff though. Thank you all so much for the support, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. I'm actually already working on another as we speak, and I cannot wait for you guys to see it. Also, please consider subscribing if you haven't already, because it really helps me get my stuff out there for more people to see it. Also, leave a like on this video if you liked it. That also helps me. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and have a fantastic day.